Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Nature Channel. Tonight, we're going to follow something extraordinary, something that happens so quietly in the forest that most people walk right past it without ever knowing. Did you know that a single tree, standing alone in a field or at the edge of a wood, holds within itself the silent blueprint for an entire forest? Not just one or two offspring, but hundreds of trees stretching out over years and decades, forming canopies and carpets of moss and homes for thousands of creatures, all from one beginning, one seed, one root, one reaching toward the light. There is something almost unbelievably generous about that. So tonight, let's slow down together. Let's breathe gently. Let your shoulders drop. Let the weight of your day soften just a little. We're going to walk very slowly into the world of trees and the quiet magic of how forests are born. Imagine you are standing at the edge of an open meadow sometime in early autumn. The air is cool but not cold, carrying that particular sweetness of dried grass and turned earth. The sky above you is pale blue, fading at the horizon into a soft, dusty gold. And in the middle of this meadow, not far from where you stand, there is a single tree. It is an oak, not a young one. This oak has been here for a long time, perhaps 70 or 80 years. Its bark is deeply furrowed like the surface of an old river stone, and its canopy spreads wide and generous, casting a pool of shade on the grass below. You can hear the wind moving through its leaves, that soft, ongoing murmur that oaks make, somewhere between a whisper and a sigh. Now, here is the first quiet wonder of this evening. That one oak tree standing alone in the meadow is already a forest in waiting, not in its branches, but in its acorns. A single mature oak can produce somewhere around 20,000 acorns in a single year. 20,000. Each one a complete, sealed package of instructions. Each one carrying in its tiny core the full possibility of another oak, another canopy, another 80 years of slow and patient growing. You might walk under that tree and never think about it. You might kick an acorn aside without looking twice. But that acorn is one of 20,000 messengers being sent out this autumn alone. And the tree has been doing this for decades. Most of those acorns will not become trees. A great many are eaten by squirrels, by deer, by wood mice and jays and wild boar. This is not a tragedy, but a kind of quiet agreement between species. The animals get food, and in exchange, they carry the acorns. A squirrel buries an acorn in soft soil some distance from the parent tree and then forgets where it put it. That forgotten acorn, tucked just the right depth in just the right place, wakes up the following spring and begins. There is a word for this relationship between trees and the animals who spread their seeds. It is called seed dispersal. But the word itself is almost too clinical for what is really happening, which is more like a slow, ancient conversation. The tree says, "Here is something worth carrying," and the animal says, without knowing it, "I'll take it somewhere new." The oak has been having this conversation for 300 million years. It knows, in whatever way a tree can know things, through chemistry, through the slow language of growth, how to make itself worth carrying. Its acorn is calorie-rich, soft inside its hard shell, perfectly sized for the cheek pouches of small mammals. Everything about it is shaped by time and collaboration. Let your breathing stay slow and easy as you imagine standing near that oak. the meadow grass moves gently around your feet. A jay lands in the upper branches, eyeing the acorns. You watch it pluck one, fly off low over the grass, and disappear into a hedgerow in the distance. It doesn't know it is planting a forest, but it is. Now, look down at the ground beneath the oak itself. If you crouch low, you can see the beginnings of last year's seedlings. Tiny oak saplings, each with just 2 or 3 small leaves growing in the shade of their parent. These will likely never become great trees. The parent tree's own canopy shades them out, limiting the light they need. This, too, is intentional in its way. The tree invests more in the seeds that travel. But every so often, one of those seedlings at the base of the parent tree finds a gap in the canopy, a place where light angles in like a beam through a window. And that sapling stretches toward it with a kind of quiet urgency that is almost moving to watch. As the evening deepens and the gold in the sky softens to peach and then to lilac, you notice more about the meadow. Here and there, small oak seedlings are scattered across the grass, the work of jays and squirrels from previous years. Some are barely ankle high. Some are knee-high, their leaves already beginning to turn the rust red of autumn. They are spaced irregularly, naturally, not in rows, the way a forest always begins. This is what foresters sometimes call natural regeneration. No human planted these seedlings. No one plowed the soil or watered them or staked them upright. They arrived on the wings of birds and the teeth of small mammals, and they have been quietly, patiently doing their work ever since. You sit down in the grass for a moment, and the meadow settles around you. A wood pigeon calls from somewhere in the hedgerow. That slow, looping call that always sounds like it is asking the same gentle question over and over. The air is cooling now, carrying a trace of wood smoke from somewhere far away. It occurs to you, sitting here, that the entire meadow might one day be forest. Given enough time and enough acorns and enough jays who forget where they buried things, this open space will fill, the seedlings will grow. They will shade out the grass. New species of plants will move in under the young trees. Then animals, then insects, then fungi in the soil. A forest is not a collection of trees. It is a community. And it begins always with one tree willing to let go of 20,000 small hopes and trust that some of them will find their way. Let that thought settle gently, like a leaf drifting down to soft ground. The oak above you is still murmuring in the wind. The jay has not come back. But somewhere in the hedgerow, beneath last year's leaves, a forgotten acorn is sleeping. It will wake up when the soil warms. It already knows what it needs to become. There is another way a single tree can grow a forest, one that has nothing to do with seeds at all. It happens underground, slowly and silently, in the way that the most important things often do. Some trees spread not by sending acorns into the world, but by reaching outward through their roots. This is called vegetative reproduction, and it is one of the quietest marvels in all of nature. You have almost certainly walked through one of these forests without knowing it. A grove of aspen trees, perhaps, or a thicket of cherry plum along a field edge, or a stand of white poplar with their silver-backed leaves catching the wind. Aspen trees are perhaps the most remarkable example. When you walk through an aspen grove, those trees that look like separate individuals, each with their own pale, smooth trunk, each slightly different in the way the light falls on them, may, in fact, all be one organism. Their roots are connected beneath the soil, extending outward from a single original tree that may have lived and died thousands of years ago. What you see above ground is a forest. What lives below ground is one continuous being. The most famous example of this is a grove in Utah known as Pando. It covers more than 100 acres and contains more than 40,000 individual stems, what we would call trunks. But all of those trunks grow from a single shared root system. Pando is believed to be one of the heaviest and oldest living organisms on Earth, with an estimated age of somewhere between 80,000 and 1 million years. When you try to hold that number in your mind, it slips away a little, like water between cupped hands. 1 million years of quiet growing. The way this works is simple and elegant. The original aspen tree sends out lateral roots, long horizontal roots that travel outward through the soil in search of light and space. When conditions are right, a root will send up a new shoot, a new stem, a new tree. This new tree is genetically identical to the parent. Same leaves, same bark, same autumn color. But it stands in its own ground, reaching toward its own patch of sky. If you walk through an aspen grove in autumn, you will notice all the trees turning gold at exactly the same time. This is not coincidence. Because they share roots, they share chemical signals. When one tree senses that the days are shortening and the light is changing, that message travels through the root network, and all the trees respond together. The entire grove shifts color as one breath. If you'd like to see more stories like this one, there's a full playlist waiting for you. Just check the description below. Each one is a quiet journey into the natural world. The roots of the aspen are not passive highways. They are alive with activity. Nutrients travel along them. Sugars made by leaves in the canopy, water drawn up from deeper soil, chemical compounds that carry information about pests, diseases, dry weather, early frost. When one part of the grove is stressed, the rest can sometimes respond, directing resources where they are most needed. This kind of underground communication is not unique to aspens. A similar thing happens between trees of many species, mediated not just by root connection, but by something even more surprising: fungi. But we will come back to that in a little while. For now, stay with the image of the aspen grove. All those pale trunks, all that flickering golden light, all one. There are willow trees that do something similar, though less dramatically. A willow branch, broken off in a winter storm and carried downstream by a river, can lodge in a muddy bank and take root within days. The branch does not need a seed. It carries within its tissue all the instructions it needs to become a new tree. Within a few seasons, that one fallen branch will anchor itself deeply, spread its roots wide, and begin sending up new shoots of its own. A riverbank lined with willows often grew exactly this way, not from seeds carefully planted, but from broken pieces of older trees, each one finding a new home in new mud, beginning again without hesitation. Willows seem almost eager to propagate this way. In some cultures, people have taken advantage of this willingness, planting living willow stakes in the ground to form living fences that root and grow and provide shelter for generations. There is something deeply comforting about a plant that can begin again from a fragment of itself, A reminder, perhaps, that wholeness can come from a part, that the instructions for life are held not just in seeds, but in the wood and bark and tissue of the tree itself. Another quiet example is the hazel. Hazel trees often grow in dense thickets, and if you look closely, you will notice that many of the stems in a hazel thicket emerge from a single, broad, woody base near the ground, called a coppice stool. This base can be enormous, several feet across, gnarled and ancient, while the stems growing from it are young and slender. The stool itself may be hundreds of years old, continuously sending up new growth, continuously renewing itself. Coppicing, the practice of cutting hazel back to the base and allowing it to regrow, has been practiced by humans for thousands of years, and the hazel cooperates willingly. Cut a hazel stem, and within a season or two, a dozen new stems will rise from the wound. The tree responds to cutting the way a bush responds to pruning, with a burst of growth, a renewed reaching toward the light. You are resting now, perhaps. Your body is settling, your breath is slow, and the story is moving around you like a soft current. Think of the hazel stool, ancient in the forest floor, quietly sending up new growth year after year. Think of Pando, its roots touching beneath 100 acres of golden-leaved trees. Think of the willow branch, carrying its instructions in its cells, waiting only for water. A tree does not need to begin from a seed to begin again. It holds its own future in many different places at once, in its roots, in its branches, in the living tissue just beneath its bark. And it offers all of these futures freely to any piece of earth willing to receive them. Rest here for a moment. Let the image of those roots reaching outward in the dark earth be a kind of comfort. The soil beneath a forest is not simply dirt. It is one of the most complex living systems on earth. And it is this living soil that makes it possible for a single tree to become many. When a tree drops a leaf, that leaf does not simply disappear. It falls to the ground and begins a long, slow process of becoming something else. Fungi arrive first, sending their invisible threads, called hyphae, through the leaf's tissue, breaking it down. Then, bacteria follow. Then, tiny creatures, springtails, mites, millipedes, earthworms. Each one plays a role in dismantling the leaf, returning its minerals and sugars to the soil, making them available again for roots to drink. This process, decomposition, is often thought of as an ending, but in the forest, it is actually a beginning. Every fallen leaf is a small gift to the future. The nutrients locked inside it are released and returned, ready to be drawn up through roots and transformed once more into leaves, into wood, into the green light of new growth. A single mature tree can drop tens of thousands of leaves in an autumn. Multiplied over decades, the leaf litter beneath a tree becomes something remarkable. A deep, soft, dark layer of humus, rich with organic matter, teeming with life. This humus holds water. It regulates soil temperature. It provides the perfect medium for seeds to germinate and young roots to explore. When the acorns and seeds produced by a parent tree fall into this humus, they find ideal conditions. The soil is neither too wet nor too dry, neither too compact nor too loose. The decomposing leaves provide a light covering that protects germinating seeds from frost and desiccation. The fungi already present in the soil are ready to form partnerships with the roots of new seedlings almost immediately. Those fungal partnerships, called mycorrhizae, are among the most important relationships in the forest. The word comes from Greek, mykes, meaning fungus, and rhiza, meaning root. A mycorrhizal relationship is one in which the fungi wrap around or penetrate the root cells of a tree, extending the tree's reach vastly beyond what the roots alone could achieve. Think of it this way. A tree's roots can explore perhaps a few square meters of soil on their own. But connected to fungi, whose thread-like hyphae extend outward in every direction, the tree can effectively access nutrients and water from a much larger volume of earth. In exchange, the tree sends the fungi sugars produced through photosynthesis. It is an exchange that has been operating for more than 400 million years, longer than the forests themselves. If you're enjoying this story, a like on the video means so much. It helps more people find their way here, to this quiet place. What makes this especially relevant to our story tonight is that the mycorrhizal network beneath a forest is shared. The fungi do not connect just one tree to the soil, they connect trees to each other. The root systems of neighboring trees, linked through fungal threads, form a web that researchers have begun to call the Wood Wide Web. Though that phrase, however charming, only hints at the complexity of what is actually happening. Through this network, trees can share resources. A mother tree, a large established tree at the center of a network, may send sugars to younger seedlings growing nearby, particularly to her own offspring. Studies have found that seedlings growing near a parent tree and connected to the same fungal network grow faster and more robustly than isolated seedlings. They receive not just resources, but information, chemical signals that prepare them for drought, or warn them about insects, or simply tell them in the language of chemistry that there are others nearby. Suzanne Simard, a forest ecologist who spent decades studying this underground communication, described the mother tree as a kind of hub, the most connected node in the forest network, sending out signals and resources in all directions. When a mother tree is dying, she may send a final pulse of nutrients and information through the network to the trees around her. Not a conscious act, but a consequence of her chemistry, of the way life, at its end, releases what it has held. The soil beneath the forest, then, is not passive. It is a living archive of connection, continuously rebuilding itself, continuously exchanging resources between generations of trees. When a seed falls from a parent tree and germinates in the humus below, it enters this network almost immediately. The fungi are already there. The connection is made. The seedling is no longer alone. There is a quietness to all of this that feels worth sitting with. Beneath every forest floor, beneath every moss-covered root, and every soft carpet of old leaves, this exchange is taking place. Carbon moving from leaf to fungus to soil. Water drawn upward through root and stem. Sugars traveling sideways through the dark earth from one tree to another. We walk on the surface of this and feel only that a forest is cool, that the air is different here, that something about being among trees makes the shoulders drop and the breath slow. And all of that is real. The forest air is genuinely different, richer in oxygen and negative ions and the volatile compounds trees release. But beneath our feet, another forest is happening, one we cannot see, one made of threads thinner than spider silk and molecules moving in slow chemical conversation. The single tree that begins a forest does not do it alone. It does it in partnership with the fungi in its roots, the animals that carry its seeds, the microbes that prepare the soil for its children. It does it with everything around it. It does it over generations, patiently and without hurry, the way all the most permanent things are done. Let your body grow heavier now, softer. You are part of this world too, breathing its air, held by its ground, connected in ways you may not always think about, but that are always there. Some of the oldest forests in the world began not with a grand event, but with something so small that you could hold it in the center of your palm, a cone, a pod, a capsule no bigger than a pea. Inside, a seed wrapped in its own quiet instructions for becoming. Seeds are designed for waiting. Some seeds remain viable, alive and capable of germinating. For decades, even centuries, sealed in the right conditions. There are recorded cases of lotus seeds germinating after more than 1,000 years of dormancy. Seeds recovered from the permafrost have sprouted after being frozen for tens of thousands of years. Life in a seed is patient in a way that is almost beyond our imagining. The seeds of a birch tree are different. Tiny, light as air, barely visible without squinting. A single birch tree can release more than 1 million seeds in a year, each one equipped with 2 translucent wings that catch the wind. In a breeze, these seeds lift and drift in clouds so dense they can look like fine snow. They travel far, sometimes hundreds of meters, sometimes further on strong autumn winds. When a birch seed finds bare soil, a disturbed patch where something has cleared the way, a gravel bar beside a river, the edge of a road cut, a burned hillside, it germinates with remarkable speed. Birch is what ecologists call a pioneer species. It is often among the very first trees to colonize open ground, arriving before the oaks and beeches and more shade-tolerant species that will eventually overtake it. Birch does not need rich soil. It does not need shelter. It needs light and space, and it finds them. In this way, a single birch tree growing at the edge of a clearing can launch the beginning of a forest succession, a slow, decades-long process by which one community of plants gives way to another, more complex one. The birch arrives first, its roots beginning to loosen the soil and add organic matter. Then shrubs move in under the birch canopy. Then, carried by birds or wind or animals, the seeds of other trees arrive, rowan, then hazel, then perhaps oak. Each stage of succession creates the conditions for the next. The birch shades the ground, making it hospitable for species that cannot tolerate full sun. Its fallen leaves enrich the soil, creating humus. Its roots host fungi that begin to build the underground network. By doing what a birch naturally does, growing fast, leafing out abundantly, falling and decomposing, it prepares the ground for what comes after. Eventually, the birch may be shaded out by the oaks and beeches it helped to establish. Its trunks, pale and elegant in the young forest, will thin as the canopy closes above them. Some foresters describe this as the birch sacrificing itself for the forest. That framing carries perhaps more intention than is strictly accurate, but there is something true in it. The birch gives what it has, fully and without reserve, and in doing so, makes space for something larger and more permanent. The playlist on this channel holds many more quiet evenings like this one. You might find it waiting for you whenever you need a gentle place to rest your mind. There are trees whose seeds require very specific conditions to germinate, conditions that, in nature, are created by specific events. Lodgepole pines, for example, produce serotinous cones, cones that are sealed with resin and remain closed for years, sometimes decades, waiting for the heat of a wildfire to melt the resin and release the seeds inside. This sounds alarming, but it is the opposite of a catastrophe. It is a strategy, one refined over millions of years of living in fire-prone landscapes. After a wildfire burns through a lodgepole pine forest, the canopy opens completely, flooding the ground with light. The burned soil is nutrient-rich. Competition from other plants has been cleared. And at that moment, the serotinous cones release their seeds by the thousands, millions, across an entire hillside, into the most ideal conditions imaginable for germination. Within a decade of a lodgepole pine fire, the hillside can be carpeted with young pines so dense that they shade out almost everything else. Within 50 years, the forest has largely returned. The fire was not an ending. It was the trigger the forest had been waiting for, holding in its closed cones for all those years. Not all seeds need fire, of course. Some need cold, a period of dormancy during winter called stratification that primes the seed for germination when warmth returns. If you plant an apple seed directly in warm soil without this cold period, it may not germinate at all. It needs to have experienced winter before it can believe in spring. Other seeds need to pass through the digestive system of an animal before their outer coating is softened enough to allow germination. Mistletoe seeds are coated in a sticky substance that birds wipe off on bark, exactly where the plant needs to be planted. The interaction between seed and creature is so finely tuned that in some cases, the extinction of the animal means the tree cannot reproduce effectively anymore. The Tambala coke tree of Mauritius, sometimes called the dodo tree, was once believed to germinate only after its seeds had passed through the digestive system of the dodo bird. The dodo went extinct in the 17th century, and for a time it seemed as if the Tambala coke might follow it, unable to reproduce without its partner. The story turned out to be more complex than that, but it points to something important. Trees and their seed dispersers are often deeply intertwined. The forest is not just trees. It is trees and the living world that surrounds them, and the two are inseparable. Rest softly as we move forward. Your breath is slower now, and the forest is still all around you. All of these seeds, the wind-blown birch, the fire-triggered pine, the bird-dispersed mistletoe, are the handwriting of a single tree on the landscape. Each one a small instruction sent out into the world, hoping for the right conditions. And when the conditions are right, a forest begins to answer. There is a kind of tree that grows by reaching downward, not its roots, but its branches. Long, arching branches that dip toward the ground, touch the soil, and there, quietly, take root. This is called layering. You can see it in willows that grow beside streams, their branches trailing into the water or resting on damp ground. You can see it in brambles, technically not a tree, but a woody shrub whose canes arch outward and root where they touch soil, creating expanding clones of the original plant in every direction. And you can see it most dramatically in the banyan tree. The banyan is a kind of fig tree, or rather, it grows from a fig tree, beginning its life as an epiphyte, a plant growing on another plant, high in the canopy. A bird drops a fig seed into the fork of another tree, and the banyan begins there, growing roots downward toward the ground and branches upward toward the light. Over time, the banyan's roots reach the soil and thicken into columns. The host tree may eventually be shaded out and disappear, and the banyan continues, expanding, dropping new roots from its branches, each one becoming a new trunk, each new trunk sending out new branches. The result, given enough time, is not a tree in any conventional sense. It is a forest of trunks, all belonging to one organism, all connected by the original branches above. The largest banyan tree in the world, in Kolkata, India, covers more than 3.5 acres of ground and has more than 3,000 aerial roots that have become trunks. It was planted, or perhaps grew, more than 250 years ago from a single seed. Walking through a large banyan grove is an experience that is difficult to put into words. The air is dim and cool. The trunks, some slender, some massive, create a colonnade in every direction, their surfaces covered in textured bark that catches the filtered green light. The ground is carpeted in the banyan's own fallen leaves, soft and deeply silent. You cannot easily see where one part of the tree ends and another begins. You cannot find the edge of it. In India, where banyan trees are sacred, they are often the gathering places for villages. The great tree that shelters everyone, that has been there longer than living memory, that will likely be there longer than anyone now alive. The word banyan itself comes from the Sanskrit word for merchant, because travelers and traders once gathered and rested in the shade of these trees. The tree and the people around it have been in conversation for a very long time. The fig family to which the banyan belongs is, ecologically speaking, one of the most important groups of trees in the world. Figs produce fruit year-round, unlike most trees, which fruit only seasonally. This means that fig trees are reliable food sources in tropical forests at times when other food is scarce. Hundreds of species of birds, bats, mammals, and insects depend on fig trees for survival. In some tropical forests, if you removed the figs, the animal community would collapse. You're in a lovely, quiet place right now. If this kind of peace is something you'd like to return to, a like on this video helps it reach more people who might need it. The strangest and most intimate relationship the fig tree has is with a tiny wasp, the fig wasp. Every species of fig is pollinated by its own specific species of fig wasp, and only that species. The female wasp enters the enclosed fig, which is technically a syconium, a hollow receptacle lined with tiny flowers inside, through a small opening at the tip. She pollinates the flowers as she moves through, and she lays her eggs. Then she dies. Her larvae hatch inside the fig, grow to adulthood mate, and then the females crawl out, dusted with pollen, to find another fig to enter. They carry the tree's pollen with them. The relationship is so specific, so ancient, so precise, that fig and fig wasp have been co-evolving together for perhaps 80 million years. When you eat a fig, you are eating the fruit of this relationship, the result of 80 million years of a wasp and a tree working out the details of their arrangement. The sweetness in your mouth is, in a small way, the sweetness of deep time. Back in cooler forests, another kind of layering is happening. Hawthorn shrubs, elder bushes, and dogrose sprawl outward along hedgerows and field edges, their branches sometimes taking root where they lie on soft ground. These hedgerow plants are among the most effective woodland colonizers in temperate regions, sending out roots and suckers and layers, creeping slowly but continuously into open ground, establishing themselves by inches and feet each year. A hedgerow that has been in place for several hundred years, and many in Europe have, is not just a row of shrubs. It is a narrow, complex woodland in its own right, layered, diverse, full of life. Some hedgerows have been dated by the number of tree and shrub species they contain. The older the hedgerow, generally, the more species it supports. An old hedgerow is a record of time, written in the languages of oak and hawthorn and field maple. Each of those species may have arrived from a single parent plant. One hawthorn beside a gate, one elder at a field corner, that spread outward over the years until it filled 100 meters of boundary. The forest, in miniature, always begins this way. One plant, sending itself outward in every direction it can reach, patient and without urgency, trusting the ground. The world outside is quiet now, and you, here in this story, are very gently becoming part of that quiet. In the high mountains, above the tree line where the wind is constant and the winters are long and the soil is thin and stony, even there the forest reaches. Just below the tree line, where conditions permit, you find the most beautiful and most resilient trees in the world. These are the mountain pines, the dwarf junipers, the hardy rowans and birches that grow close to the earth, their trunks twisted and bent by decades of wind and snow, their forms unlike anything in the valley below. A mountain pine that has been growing for 200 years may be no taller than your knee, a dense, sprawling cushion of green pressed low against the rock by the weight of winter snows and the persistence of the wind. Botanists call this growth form Krummholz, a German word meaning crooked wood. And within these crooked low forms, the trees do something that is both practical and quietly moving. They spread not upward, where the wind would destroy them, but laterally. Branches that press against the snow, or are buried by it, sometimes take root where they touch the ground, creating new anchor points, new roots, new growth. A single Krummholz pine on a mountain can, over centuries, form a dense thicket tens of meters across, all from one original stem. The original stem may have long since died and rotted away, but the thicket continues, a living ring expanding outward at the pace of inches per decade, each year a little further from where it began. These Krummholz thickets are among the most extraordinary living things on the mountain. Inside them, in the sheltered space beneath the dense canopy of branches, the conditions are completely different from the exposed rock outside. Warmer, calmer, more humid. Small ferns and mosses grow there. Insects overwinter in the litter beneath the branches. Birds nest in the protected interior. The thicket creates its own microclimate, its own small world from the windswept rock. There is a spruce tree in Sweden that is estimated to be almost 10,000 years old. It is named Old Chico. The trunk itself is young, perhaps a few hundred years, but its root system has been continuously alive, continuously sending up new trunks as old ones die for nearly 10 millennia. Since before agriculture, since before recorded writing, since before the great civilizations of Egypt and Mesopotamia, this root system has been quietly living on a cold Swedish mountain. 10,000 years of winter, 10,000 years of being buried in snow and re-emerging each spring. 10,000 years of the same chemical conversation between root and soil, the same patient reaching toward the same patch of northern sky. There is a whole playlist of nights like this one waiting for you. Quiet forests, sleeping oceans, soft rains. Check the description when you wake up. It will be there. In forests at lower elevations, a different kind of persistence unfolds. When a large tree falls, brought down by storm or age or disease, it does not simply disappear. The fallen trunk becomes what ecologists call a nurse log, a substrate on which new life grows with remarkable vigor. Nurse logs are among the most beautiful things in an old-growth forest. You will find them covered in mosses of a dozen shades of green, in ferns uncurling from their fiddleheads, in the thin, arching roots of hemlock and cedar and spruce that have germinated on the log's surface and grown downward until their roots bracket the log like a pair of cupped hands. Eventually the log decays and disappears entirely, and you are left with a row of trees standing on raised arches of root, the ghost of the nurse log still present in the structure of the trees that grew from it. The nurse log provides a raised surface, free from the competition of ground-level plants. It provides moisture. Old decaying wood holds water like a sponge. It provides nutrients as it breaks down. And it provides the mycorrhizal fungi that are already resident in its wood, ready to connect with the roots of new seedlings almost from the moment of germination. A single large nurse log, 10 or 20 meters long, can support dozens of seedlings. Many will not survive, but some will, and those that do will carry in the structure of their roots the shape of the log they grew from, a memory of that particular fallen tree pressed into their very architecture. The falling of a great tree in an old-growth forest is not a loss. It is a gift to the fungi, to the mosses, to the seedlings that will grow in its shelter. The tree that created the forest in the end becomes the forest floor that creates the next generation. It returns what it was given with interest to the living soil. Mountains and old-growth forests are places where time moves differently. Walking into them, most people feel it, that sense of something vast and unhurried, something that has no concern with schedules or urgency. The trees there are not waiting for anything. They simply are, as they have been, as they will be. Let your body settle deeper now. Let the weight of the day become something distant and soft, like the sound of wind in very high branches. The mountain holds its Krumholtz thickets and its ancient roots. The fallen giant becomes a nurse log, the acorn, the wind-blown seed, the layered branch. Each one is a way the forest extends itself, patient and without anxiety, through time. Let us return for a moment to the forest floor, to the world of small things, because it is there that much of the forest's continuity is held. Moss is one of the oldest land plants on Earth. It arrived on land hundreds of millions of years before trees, and in some ways, it has never stopped being the foundation of everything else. In moist forests, moss covers everything: rocks, logs, the bases of trunks, the branches of trees high in the canopy. It muffles sound, it holds moisture, it creates, in its soft green carpet, 1,000 microclimates where spores and seeds can germinate. A cushion of sphagnum moss can hold up to 20 times its own weight in water. In boreal forests, where bogs and wet ground are common, sphagnum is the living medium through which forests change and grow. Its ability to hold water changes the hydrology of an entire landscape, slowing the movement of rainwater, maintaining moisture long into dry periods, creating conditions hospitable for the trees that grow above it. Mosses reproduce without seeds. They send out spores, microscopic, almost weightless, that drift on air currents and settle wherever conditions allow. A single moss plant establishing itself on the surface of a rock in the forest is the beginning of a process that may, over centuries, lead to deeper soil, richer ground, and ultimately a tree growing from what was bare stone. This is a process called primary succession. Lichens arrive first, those strange, slow-growing partnerships between algae and fungi that can survive on bare rock for thousands of years, producing acids that slowly break the rock surface down. Then mosses follow, collecting the mineral particles that erosion produces, beginning to form a thin film of soil, then herbs and grasses, then shrubs, then eventually trees. A forest growing on what was once bare granite is the work of thousands of years and thousands of small organisms, each one preparing the ground for what comes next. The tree at the top of that succession, tall, stately, perhaps impressive to the eye, owes its existence to the lichen that was there before it, breaking the rock grain by grain. Ferns are another bridge between the very old and the very new. Ferns are among the most ancient of land plants, their form almost unchanged since before the age of dinosaurs. They spread through spores as mosses do, establishing themselves in the damp and shaded places of the forest floor, their fronds unfurling in the familiar fiddlehead curl that is one of nature's most graceful movements. If you find yourself drifting, that's perfectly all right. The story will carry you gently wherever you need to go. In a young forest, where the canopy is not yet closed and light still reaches the ground, ferns can form vast carpets, walls of green that stretch between the young trees, soft and layered and moving slightly in whatever breeze filters through. These fern carpets hold moisture, suppress competing plants, and provide cover for ground-nesting birds and small mammals. They are the understory of the understory, the layer beneath the layer. As the canopy closes above them, many ferns retreat to the shadier corners, to the base of rocks and the north-facing slopes of banks. Some species of fern prefer deep shade and cannot grow in open ground at all. They are dependent on the closed canopy above them, on the conditions that only an established forest creates. They follow the forest as it grows. Fungi, too, are essential to every stage of the forest's development. Not just the mycorrhizal fungi in the roots, but the decomposers, the bracket fungi erupting from the sides of dying trees, the puffballs pushing up through leaf litter in autumn, the ghost pale threads of armillaria, honey fungus spreading through the soil beneath beech forests. Armillaria is one of the largest and oldest organisms on Earth. A single individual of honey fungus in the Malheur National Forest in Oregon covers more than 2,000 acres of ground, an underground network of threads stretching through the soil, connecting to the roots of trees, slowly breaking them down. It is estimated to be somewhere between 2,000 and 8,000 years old. You cannot see it from above. You would have no idea it was there. Yet its presence shapes the forest. Where armillaria is abundant, some trees die. Their deaths open gaps in the canopy, sudden patches of light reaching the forest floor. And into those gaps, with startling speed, new seedlings rush upward, drawn by the light, competing fiercely for the space. The death the fungus causes is the engine of renewal. The floor of an old-growth forest, when you look at it closely enough, is a community of unimaginable complexity. Each organism linked to dozens of others, each relationship part of a web that has been refining itself for millions of years. None of it is visible from above. None of it is named or celebrated, but all of it is happening always, in the dark and the damp, in the patient silence beneath our feet. Breathe gently. The floor of the forest is very soft now, very still. Let yourself rest in that softness. Water is never far from the forest story. Rain falls on the canopy and runs down leaves and branches and trunks to the ground below. Streams thread through the trees. Fog condenses on leaves in the night and drips to the soil in a form of precipitation that doesn't even register in rainfall measurements, called fog drip, that can be significant in coastal forests. Trees and water are in constant, intimate dialogue. A single large tree can transpire, release as water vapor through its leaves, hundreds of liters of water on a warm summer day. Multiplied across a forest, this transpiration contributes meaningfully to the local water cycle, creating the humid air that makes forests feel so different from open ground, and sometimes seeding the clouds that bring rain. There is evidence that large tropical forests generate their own rainfall, that the water transpired by the Amazon, for example, moves inland as what researchers call a flying river, an invisible current of water vapor that travels hundreds or thousands of kilometers before falling again as rain. The forest, in this view, does not merely respond to rain, it participates in making it. When rain falls in a forest, it does not rush immediately into streams and rivers. The soil, enriched with organic matter and crisscrossed with roots, absorbs and holds the water, releasing it slowly over days and weeks. A healthy forest acts as a vast natural sponge, smoothing out the peaks and valleys of the water cycle, storing rain during storms, releasing it slowly during dry spells, keeping streams flowing through drought. The roots of trees hold the soil together, preventing erosion. On a steep hillside, the roots of a mature forest can be the difference between stable ground and a landslide. Where forests have been removed from hillsides, heavy rains often cause catastrophic slumping. The soil no longer held in place, moving downhill in waves. The forest, in its deep and invisible way, was holding everything in place. Are you still with me? You're doing beautifully. If this kind of gentle evening brings you peace, do leave a comment below. It's always lovely to hear from you. Along rivers and streams, the relationship between trees and water is especially close. Riparian forests, the bands of trees that grow along waterways, are among the most productive and biodiverse habitats in the world. Willows, alders and poplars thrive in the wet, frequently disturbed ground beside rivers. Their roots bind the banks. Their fallen leaves feed the insects in the water below, which in turn feed the fish. Alder trees have a special relationship with nitrogen. Like legumes in a garden, alders host bacteria in nodules on their roots that can fix nitrogen from the air, converting it into a form the tree and the soil can use. An alder growing beside a stream enriches the soil beneath it with nitrogen year after year, making it more fertile for the plants and trees that grow around it. In this way, a single alder tree improves the conditions for an entire community. When an alder leaf falls into a stream, it is quickly colonized by aquatic fungi and bacteria, which partially decompose it into a form that aquatic insects called shredders can process. These insects, in turn, are eaten by larger invertebrates, which are eaten by fish. The leaf that the alder tree dropped in autumn becomes salmon flesh by spring in a chain of transformation that moves from tree to stream to river to sea. In old-growth forests near rivers, fallen trees create some of the most complex and valuable aquatic habitats imaginable. A large trunk lying across a stream creates pools and riffles, slowing the current in places, speeding it in others, providing shelter for fish. The pools that form behind large wood are deeper and cooler than those in streams without wood, prime habitat for trout. The roots of the fallen tree, still projecting above the bank, create overhanging refuges where fish can rest. The forest's relationship with the stream does not end when the tree falls. It deepens. The fallen tree feeds the stream for decades as it slowly decomposes, releasing nutrients into the water, hosting the insects and fungi that sustain the aquatic community. Long after the tree is no longer recognizable as a tree, when it has become a soft, dark mound of wood fiber barely distinguishable from the bank, it is still giving to the water. Rain falling in a forest is one of the most beautiful sounds in the natural world. It begins high in the canopy, a soft patter on leaves that sounds almost like applause, gentle, continuous, unhurried. Then it drips to the lower canopy, and then to the understory, and then to the forest floor, arriving there quieter than it began, filtered and slowed, having lost much of its energy to the leaves above. Inside a forest during light rain, you are sheltered. The rain falls, but most of it does not reach you directly. You hear it above you. You feel the occasional drop that makes it all the way down. You smell the earth responding, that deep mineral sweetness called petrichor, the smell of rain on dry soil, which comes from compounds released by bacteria in the ground. The forest breathes it out around you. The rain is very soft now, very distant. Let it be a sound that carries you gently, like water carrying a leaf. As the forest grows older, as the seedlings become saplings, and the saplings become young trees, and the young trees become old ones, something shifts in the quality of the forest itself. It becomes over time something richer, stranger, and more deeply alive than anything a young forest can be. An old-growth forest is not simply an older version of a young one. It is a different kind of place entirely, where young forests tend to be relatively uniform, similar-sized trees competing for light, a relatively simple canopy. Old-growth forests are characterized by structural complexity. Trees of many different ages and sizes, gaps where giants have fallen, standing dead trees called snags, deep accumulations of woody debris on the ground. This complexity is the product of centuries of disturbance and recovery, of individual trees living and dying and being replaced, of gaps opening and closing in the canopy, of slow processes of succession playing out across decades and generations. No two patches of old-growth forest are quite the same. Each is a record of its particular history, its particular sequence of storms and droughts and beaver dams and falling trees. The standing dead trees, the snags, are among the most important elements of an old-growth forest. A large, dead tree, still standing, provides nesting habitat for cavity-nesting birds, owls, woodpeckers, chickadees, nuthatches. As the wood softens, it becomes easier to excavate. Woodpeckers create new cavities each year, and their old holes are colonized by birds that cannot excavate their own. A single large snag may host dozens of bird families over the course of its decades-long decay. When the snag finally falls, it becomes a nurse log, and the cycle continues. The tree that was a snag is now a seedbed. The hollows that birds nested in become habitat for salamanders and beetles and fungi. Nothing is wasted. Nothing ends without becoming something else. Trees in old-growth forests are in constant communication through the mycorrhizal network, and the network itself becomes more elaborate and more connected as the forest ages. Young forests have relatively simple networks. Old-growth forests have been building theirs for centuries, a web so dense and interconnected that in some patches of forest, almost every tree is connected to almost every other tree. If this feels like exactly the right kind of company for falling asleep, there's a whole playlist of these stories. You'll find the link in the description. It will be there whenever you need it. In this complex network, the oldest and largest trees, the mother trees, serve as nodes of exceptional connectivity. They are connected to more trees and to more fungal species than any younger tree in the forest. Their influence extends outward through the network in all directions. When they die, their loss is felt throughout the network. A sudden reduction in connectivity, in resources, in the flow of information through the web. This is why old-growth forests cannot simply be replanted. A young plantation of the same species grown in the same location is not an old-growth forest and cannot become one quickly. The network beneath it is nascent, the structural complexity absent, the centuries of accumulated organic matter and connection not yet present. To create an old-growth forest from scratch requires time that exceeds human lifespans, multiple generations of patient, undisturbed growth. What we can do, what many conservation efforts aim to do, is protect the old growth that remains and allow second-growth forests to develop in peace, giving them the time they need to complexify. A forest left alone will move toward old-growth character on its own, without any intervention from us, provided only that it is given enough time and enough quiet. In the old forests of Białowieża, on the border of Poland and Belarus, trees have been growing and dying without significant human interference for thousands of years. The result is one of the last remaining old-growth lowland forests in Europe, a place where oak trees have been alive since the Middle Ages, where the understory is dark and complex, where European bison still move through the trees as they have for millennia. Walking through Białowieża, those who have written about it describe the experience in similar terms. A sense of entering something ancient and self-contained, a world operating according to its own deep logic, unhurried and vast. The sound of it is different, quieter in one sense, and yet alive with small sounds. The creak of old wood, the distant drumming of a woodpecker, the rustle of something small in the leaf litter. All of it, every ancient oak, every fallen trunk, every lichen-covered rock, grew from somewhere, from a seed, a root, a blown branch, a forgotten acorn, from one tree that began it all, sometime before human memory, in a moment of germination so small and unremarkable that no one was there to see it. And from that one beginning, everything. The old forest is very quiet now, very still. Let its quiet become your quiet. There are islands in the world, young islands newly formed from volcanic eruption, that begin as bare rock, no soil, no seeds, nothing alive, just stone, cooling in the ocean. And then the forest comes. It comes first as spores on the wind, fern spores, lichen spores, moss spores, riding air currents from distant continents, settling on the bare rock. Then seeds arrive, some carried by birds that rest on the island in their migrations, some blown on exceptional storms, some floating in on ocean currents in their buoyant husks. The Hawaiian Islands were built this way. Before humans arrived, every plant in Hawaii had arrived by wind, wave, or wing, across 2,000 miles of open Pacific. On average, a new species of plant colonized the islands once every 100,000 years. Each arrival was the founding of a lineage. Each founding tree, establishing itself on the volcanic soil, was the ancestor of a forest. The Hawaiian tree, called the Ohia lehua, was often the first tree to establish itself on new lava flows. Its seeds small enough and tough enough to colonize the bare, cracked rock, while most other plants could not yet survive. An ohia tree growing on a recent lava flow is a pioneer in the most absolute sense. It arrives in a world with no other plants, no existing soil, no mycorrhizal network, no leaf litter. It makes do. Over decades, the ohia grows and drops its leaves and dies in parts, creating, grain by grain, the beginnings of soil. Fungi arrive, other plants follow. The island, if left alone, will slowly clothe itself in forest. Not the same forest it would have grown if different seeds had arrived first, but a forest nonetheless. Life finds its way. This is ecological succession in its most fundamental form. Life arriving in stages, each stage creating the conditions for the next, the whole progression tending over time toward complexity. You can watch it happen on a young volcanic island, or in the aftermath of a glacier's retreat, or in an old field left fallow, wherever bare ground exists and is left in peace. Let your eyes stay soft, your breathing gentle. You're doing something kind for yourself tonight, and that matters. In Iceland, where glaciers have retreated significantly over the past century, the newly exposed ground is being slowly colonized by plants advancing from the south. Mosses first, then grasses, then dwarf willows and birches. The process is being watched by ecologists with a combination of scientific interest and quiet wonder. They are observing succession in real time, the forest's slow reach into newly available ground. On the slopes of Mount St. Helens in Washington state, the volcano that erupted catastrophically in 1980, devastating hundreds of square miles of forest, the recovery of the forest has surprised and moved everyone who has followed it. Within a year of the eruption, plants were growing in the ash. Within a decade, young alders and fireweed had colonized the devastated zone. Within 3 decades, a young forest was emerging. The survivors, individual trees and animals that happened to be protected under snow or on sheltered slopes, became the founders of the recovery. A single pocket gopher, tunneling under the ash, brought seeds and soil from below, starting a patch of vegetation that spread outward. A small stand of trees protected by a ridge became the seed source for the recovering forest around it. The recovery was not uniform, not planned, not directed. It was life finding its way back from every surviving fragment by every available path. Watching a forest recover from disturbance is, in some ways, more moving than watching an established forest. You can see the effort in it, the individual seedlings pushing through ash or snow, the pioneer plants advancing inch by inch across bare ground, the first bird returning to a newly leafed out tree and beginning to sing. Each small success is visible because there is nothing else around it yet. The forest is building itself in front of you. All forests have been through this kind of rebuilding, perhaps many times over the long course of their history. Ice ages came and went, pushing forests south and then allowing them to return north as the climate warmed. Volcanoes erupted, rivers changed course, climates shifted, and through all of it, the trees kept sending out their seeds, their roots, their underground networks, their patient reaching toward whatever light and soil and water were available. The forest is not fragile. It is ancient and resilient and deeply willing to return. What it asks of us, mostly, is only to be given the space to do what it has always done. The ground is warm beneath you. The sky above the canopy is full of slow stars. Rest here, in the deep canopy of a mature forest, in that green, dim, filtering world between the treetops and the ground, lives a community of organisms that most people never think about. High in the branches, on the bark, and in the crevices, and in the slowly accumulating soil that collects in the fork of major limbs, an entire world of miniature life carries on. Epiphytes are plants that grow on other plants without being parasitic, drawing no sustenance from the host, simply using it as a platform. Mosses and ferns are the most common, but in tropical and cloud forests, epiphytes include bromeliads, orchids, and other flowering plants of extraordinary variety and beauty. A single large tree in a tropical cloud forest may host hundreds of species of epiphytes. The combined weight of these plants, along with the soil that accumulates around their roots, can be enormous, sometimes exceeding the weight of the tree's own foliage. The tree, patiently, carries all of this. Bromeliads in tropical forests often form cups at their centers, rosettes of stiff leaves that collect rainwater. These small pools, suspended in the canopy, become entire aquatic ecosystems. Specialized mosquitoes lay their eggs in them, frogs breed in them, aquatic insects spend their larval stages in them. They are ponds in the air, sustained by the rain and the geometry of the plant. The tree that hosts all of this is, in effect, a landscape. Its bark is a substrate for mosses and lichens. Its forks are soil for epiphytes. Its hollow limbs are homes for birds and bats and squirrels. Its roots, underground, are embedded in the fungal web. Its canopy is a feeding ground for insects, which are prey for birds, which carry seeds in their droppings that may germinate in the epiphyte soil, high in the branches, and never touch the forest floor at all. Everything in the forest is, in some sense, carried by everything else. The large trees carry the epiphytes. The epiphytes carry the frogs. The frogs eat the insects. The insects pollinate the flowers. The flowers become the fruit. The fruit feeds the birds. The birds carry the seeds. The seeds grow into the trees that carry the epiphytes. This is a good place to rest. If you'd like to come back to this kind of quiet on other evenings, the playlist is full of gentle journeys. You'll find it in the description below. Orchids are perhaps the most famous of the canopy epiphytes, and one of the most diverse plant families on Earth, with somewhere between 25 and 30,000 species, more than any other flowering plant family. They grow on trees in tropical forests and on rocks in alpine meadows and in the deep understory of cool northern woodlands. They have been on Earth for more than 80 million years. Most orchids are entirely dependent on specific fungi for germination. An orchid seed is the smallest seed produced by any flowering plant. So small that it contains almost no stored energy, just a tiny embryo wrapped in a thin coat. When it germinates, it must immediately connect with a mycorrhizal fungus, which provides the sugars it needs to survive until it can photosynthesize. Without the fungus, the seed cannot germinate. Every orchid alive today is the product of a successful encounter between a seed and the right fungus, in the right place, at the right time. This is why transplanting orchids rarely works, and why wild orchid populations are so difficult to re-establish once lost. The plant is not just dependent on soil and light. It is dependent on a specific community of fungi that may only be present in undisturbed, established habitats. The orchid is, in this sense, a measure of the forest's health. Where orchids grow well, the forest beneath them is intact. Ferns in the canopy are more versatile. Some have evolved the ability to trap their own falling debris, dead fronds, dust, leaf fall, in basket-like rosettes that accumulate soil over years. These basket ferns, or bird's nest ferns, can weigh hundreds of kilograms and support extraordinarily rich communities of invertebrates in the soil they accumulate. Beetles, ants, centipedes, spiders, earthworms, entire food webs compressed into a single plant's accumulated litter suspended 30 meters above the ground. The forest, seen from above, is a canopy, green, continuous, impenetrable to the eye. Seen from within, it is a series of layers, each one its own world. The canopy, the understory, the shrub layer, the ground layer, and below that, the soil. Each layer has its own light quality, its own temperature and humidity, its own community of species. A forest is not one ecosystem. It is a stack of ecosystems, each one nested within the others, each one made possible by the ones above and below it. Close your eyes for a moment, if you haven't already. The canopy is green above you. The air is cool and still. Birds and forests have been shaping each other for a very long time, since before there were forests as we know them, back when the ancestors of birds were climbing and gliding through the first primitive tree-like plants. That relationship, maintained over 100 million years, has made birds into one of the most powerful forces in forest ecology. A single bird, say a Clark's nutcracker in the mountains of western North America, can carry up to 100 pine seeds at a time in a special pouch beneath its tongue. In a single season, one nutcracker may cache tens of thousands of seeds in thousands of different locations scattered across the landscape. It remembers most of them. Its spatial memory is extraordinary. but a small fraction are forgotten or abandoned. Those become trees. Clark's nutcrackers are directly responsible for the regeneration of whitebark pine forests at high elevations. The whitebark pine produces seeds enclosed in cones that do not open on their own. They must be opened by the nutcracker. The relationship between bird and tree is so tight that whitebark pine cannot regenerate effectively without the nutcracker. Where nutcracker populations have declined, whitebark pine has struggled to recover after disturbance. The relationship works because it benefits both parties. The nutcracker gets a reliable, calorie-dense food source. The tree gets a reliable seed disperser who caches seeds at precisely the right depth for germination in microhabitats spread across a large area. Neither party planned this arrangement. It evolved over generations because individuals who did it had more offspring than those who didn't. The result, after many thousands of years, is an interdependence so complete that neither can easily do without the other. In tropical forests, fruit-eating birds called hornbills are among the most important seed dispersers. Hornbills have large bills, wide gapes, and can swallow entire large fruits whole. They carry seeds for kilometers before depositing them in their droppings far from the parent tree. Some of the largest seeds in tropical forests, too big for most animals to swallow, are primarily dispersed by hornbills. A forest without hornbills gradually changes character. The large-seeded trees, unable to disperse their seeds effectively, decline in number. Smaller-seeded trees, whose seeds can still be spread by smaller animals, increase. The forest does not disappear, but it shifts, becomes simpler, less varied, less itself. The hornbill was not just eating fruit. It was maintaining the diversity of the forest. You might already be quite sleepy now. That's exactly as it should be. Let the story continue quietly around you, like soft music. Hummingbirds are among the most specialized of all bird-flower relationships. They hover in front of flowers whose deep, tubular structure is perfectly matched to the hummingbird's long bill, inaccessible to most insects, designed specifically for this kind of encounter. The flower offers nectar. The hummingbird collects pollen on its head or throat. The pollen is carried to the next flower. Some hummingbird flowers produce nectar only in the early morning, matching the feeding schedule of the specific species they depend on. Others orient their flowers toward the direction from which hummingbirds typically approach. Others have evolved flower colors, deep reds and oranges, that are visible to hummingbirds, but not to the insects that might otherwise visit and provide less effective pollination. Each of these adaptations took thousands of generations to develop. Each represents a conversation between a bird and a flower, conducted in the slow language of evolution, each small adjustment in one partner provoking a response in the other. The result is a partnership so specific and so finely tuned that it looks, from the outside, almost intentional. Back in the temperate forest, smaller interactions are equally important. The nuthatch that walks down a tree trunk, the only bird that habitually descends headfirst, is searching for insects hidden in the bark. In doing so, it controls populations of bark beetles and other insects that might otherwise damage the tree. The woodpecker's excavation creates cavities. The jay's burying creates a forest. Every bird in the forest is part of the forest, not a visitor to it, not a passenger within it, but a participant in its ongoing life, shaping and being shaped by it, contributing to its continuity in ways that took millions of years to develop and that are, in the truest sense, indispensable. Listen, in the quietness of wherever you are right now, for the memory of birdsong. That effortless, unpremeditated music, the robin at dusk, the blackbird in early morning, the owl moving through the dark forest on silent wings. The forest sings partly through its birds, and the song it sings is, in part, the same song it has always sung. I am here, I am here, I am still here. Let that sound carry you softly. The forest sings for no one in particular, and for everyone. It sings for you. A forest in winter is a different world from the one we have been walking through. The deciduous trees have dropped their leaves. That great annual release that happens so gradually and then so suddenly. The trees letting go of what they spent all spring and summer building. The branches are bare, the canopy is gone, and the forest opens up in a way that feels both stark and beautiful. But the forest is not sleeping, not entirely. Even in the coldest months, things are happening. Beneath the snow, the mycorrhizal network is quiet but intact. The roots of the trees, though not actively growing in the cold, are still alive, still breathing slowly, still maintaining their connections to the fungal web. The fungi themselves are metabolizing slowly, keeping their threads viable through the winter, ready to resume more active exchange when the soil warms. The seeds in the soil are waiting. This is their time of stratification, that cold period that many seeds require before they will germinate. The winter is not their enemy. It is the preparation they need. They lie in the dark beneath the leaf litter, experiencing the slow decrease in temperature, storing this information in their chemistry, knowing, in whatever chemical way a seed can know, that spring is coming. Animals that remain active in winter, the squirrel, the jay, the woodpecker, continue to visit the forest. The squirrel digs for its cached nuts, finding some, missing others. Each one it misses is a potential tree. The woodpecker excavates frozen wood in search of overwintering insects. It's drumming the clearest sound in the bare winter forest, carrying far through the cold air. On mild days in late winter, when the light is still thin, but the sun has an angle to it that wasn't there in December, something stirs in the cambium of the trees. The cambium is the thin layer of living tissue just beneath the bark where all the tree's growth happens. On these mild days, it begins to prepare. Cells that have been quiescent through the cold begin to receive signals. The days are lengthening. Something is coming. The sap begins to move. In maple trees, this early movement of sap, before the leaves have emerged, before the tree is properly awake, is the moment that maple syrup is made from. Collected and boiled down, this thin, barely sweet sap becomes the dense amber sweetness that people have been harvesting in the northeastern forests of North America for thousands of years. It is the first sign of the year's turning, winter's last gift, offered by a tree not yet fully awake. The year is turning now, very slowly, very quietly, as all the most important turnings are made. In early spring, before the leaf canopy closes above them, the forest floor receives the most light it will see all year. The trees are bare, the sun is climbing, and the ground is suddenly flooded with direct light. In response, the spring ephemerals emerge. those small, brief flowers that time their entire above-ground life to this window of light. Wood anemones open their white flowers to the pale spring sun. Bluebells push up through the leaf litter, millions of them in some old woodlands, creating a blue haze that visitors describe almost with awe. Wild garlic carpets the ground beside streams, its white flowers and distinctive scent carried on the still cool air. Violets, wood sorrel, primroses, celandines, each one making the most of the light before the canopy closes above them. These spring flowers set seed quickly. The bluebell's flowers are gone before the summer solstice, their leaves yellowing and lying flat as the canopy leafs out above them. The plant stores its energy in its bulb through the summer, autumn, and winter, ready to emerge again next spring. It has been doing this in these same woods for centuries, possibly longer. Some bluebell populations are believed to be ancient relics of forest that has been undisturbed for thousands of years. The return of the leaves is one of the year's most extraordinary events. The gradual, then sudden transformation of the bare winter forest into the green cathedral of summer. It happens so quickly once it begins that you can almost watch it. The buds swelling, the first pale green unfurling, the canopy filling in day by day till the light beneath the trees is the deep, filtered green that stays all summer long. This transformation happens because a single tree has exchanged its winter's rest for spring's growing. And because every tree in the forest does this, each one responding to the same lengthening days and warming soil, the transformation is simultaneous and complete. One day, you can see the sky through the bare branches. A few weeks later, you cannot. The forest has closed its canopy for another year. The spring ephemerals are fading below. The birds are singing their territorial songs in the upper branches. The mycorrhizal web is humming with activity as the trees begin to photosynthesize in earnest and sugars begin to flow. A new season of growth has begun. The forest is green again. The canopy is closed. The light is soft and filtered, and you are beneath it, very gently resting. As the summer moves through the forest, the trees are doing something invisible and remarkable. Every leaf is a tiny solar panel, capturing the energy of light and using it to convert water and carbon dioxide into sugar, a process called photosynthesis that is among the most important chemical reactions on Earth. Without it, there would be no food for any animal anywhere. A single leaf is not very impressive, but a tree has, on average, somewhere between 200,000 and 500,000 leaves, depending on species and size. And a forest contains billions of trees. The quantity of photosynthesis happening in a temperate forest on a clear summer day is almost beyond imagining. A silent, distributed solar harvest on a planetary scale. The carbon captured by that photosynthesis, pulled out of the air and built into wood and root and leaf, is one of the primary ways the Earth's carbon cycle is regulated. Forests are among the most significant carbon stores on the planet. The carbon in the wood of an old-growth tree has been out of the atmosphere for decades or centuries. Protecting old trees is, among other things, protecting a great deal of stored carbon from returning to the air. As trees grow, they are building themselves from air. The bulk of a tree's mass, its trunk, its branches, its roots, is composed primarily of carbon that was once carbon dioxide, floating in the atmosphere, and was pulled down by a leaf and built into cellulose and lignin. A tree is, in a literal sense, solidified air and sunlight, shaped by water and time. That is a thought worth holding for a moment. The great oak in the meadow, hundreds of years old, dozens of meters tall, immovable in any wind, was built molecule by molecule from something as insubstantial as air, from something invisible and everywhere, from light. The wood that a tree builds is one of the most remarkable materials in the natural world. It is strong and flexible, resistant to compression and tension, capable of supporting enormous weight, and it grows, unlike stone or metal, continuously throughout the tree's life. Wood can be preserved for thousands of years under the right conditions. Wood from ancient structures and ships has given us detailed records of climate going back centuries. The rings of the tree recording each year's growth, wide rings for good years, narrow rings for hard ones. You've traveled a long way tonight through seeds and roots and canopies and ancient networks. You're doing wonderfully. Just rest and let the story carry you. Tree rings are a kind of autobiography. Each ring is a year, a full cycle of growth, from the wide-celled spring wood to the dense summer wood that marks the ring's edge. In a cross-section of an old tree, you can read droughts and good rains, cold summers and warm ones, years when insects defoliated the canopy, and years when everything grew freely. The tree has written its life in its wood, and those who know how to read it can hear its whole history. The oldest living individual trees, not clonal organisms like Pando, but single-stemmed trees, are among the most ancient living things on Earth. Methuselah, a bristlecone pine in the White Mountains of California, is more than 4,800 years old. It was already ancient when the Egyptian pyramids were new. It has seen empires rise and fall without moving, without any concern for human history, simply growing its slow rings in the dry, thin air of the high desert. Bristlecone pines survive where almost nothing else can, on rocky, alkaline soils at elevations above 3,000 meters, in a climate of extreme cold, drought, and high ultraviolet radiation. Their secret, in part, is their extreme slowness. They grow so slowly that their wood becomes extraordinarily dense, almost stone-like in its hardness. A bristlecone pine adds perhaps a centimeter of trunk diameter per century, but what it builds is nearly indestructible. To stand beside a bristlecone pine, with its ancient twisted trunk, its sparse clusters of needles, its bark eroded by centuries of wind into sculptural shapes, is to be in the presence of something that operates at a completely different scale of time from anything in ordinary human experience. It was here before you. It will almost certainly be here after any person now alive. It is simply, quietly, itself. All the trees we have spoken of tonight, the spreading oak, the clonal aspen, the pioneer birch, the ancient bristlecone, are expressions of the same deep impulse to grow, to reach, to continue, to send themselves outward in whatever direction is available, to transform light and air and water into wood, into leaf, into the quiet permanence of a living thing that stays. Each one began somewhere. Each one began from something small, a seed, a root, a buried branch, a spore on the wind. And from that small beginning, something vast. You are nearly at the end of tonight's journey. The trees are very still around you. The air is cool and sweet. We have walked a long way tonight, through meadows and mountain slopes and tropical canopies and frozen tundra, through millions of years of quiet growth, through underground webs of fungi and overground networks of birds, through the slow metabolism of ancient trees and the brief brilliance of spring flowers. And at the center of it all, the image we began with and return to now, the single tree. It stands in the meadow, or on the mountain, or at the edge of the water. Its roots reach down into the living soil, into the mycorrhizal web, into the dark and the damp, where all the most important things are happening without any light at all. Its trunk rises, steady and unhurried, its bark the color of old stone. Its canopy spreads wide, a great green architecture that took decades to build and that builds itself still every season. It drops its seeds. Some will be eaten. Some will be carried by jays to distant soil and forgotten. Some will fall into the leaf litter below and wait there through the winter, stratifying, preparing. Some will germinate close by and reach for the small patches of light that filter through the parent's canopy. Its roots send out horizontal runners, probing for space and light. In favorable ground, a new shoot will rise. Then another. Then another. A ring of trees expands outward, all of them connected, all of them one, all of them quietly extending themselves into the landscape 1 inch at a time, 1 year at a time, 1 century at a time. In the soil beneath the tree, the mycorrhizal network extends its offer to every seedling that germinates nearby. The seedlings accept. They are no longer alone. They are part of something larger, something already ancient, something that will continue after them. Birds carry seeds from the tree to distant locations. Those seeds germinate into trees that carry no memory of their parent. They do not know they are part of anything larger, but they are. The forest that grows from them is still, in some sense, the same forest, the same lineage, the same unbroken thread of life stretching back to that one original tree, which stretches back to the one before it, which stretches back and back and back through the deep time of a world that has been growing trees for 350 million years. There is no word for what this is. There is only the feeling of it, the feeling of being, for a moment, part of something that does not end, something that continues through ice ages and volcanic eruptions and the slow drift of continents, through all the centuries of human history and long before it, and on into whatever comes next. The tree does not know any of this. It does not need to. It simply grows. It simply reaches toward the light with everything it has, puts its roots down into the dark earth with absolute confidence, and offers everything: its leaves, its seeds, its wood, its decay, its mycorrhizal connections, its patient years of growth, to the living world around it. It asks nothing in return. It does not ask to be remembered. It does not ask to be seen. It stands in the field or on the mountain or at the edge of the water, and it is what it is, completely and without reservation. And from that one standing, one reaching, one quiet and determined being, a forest grows. The night is very gentle now. The canopy above you is still, the branches barely moving. Somewhere in the dark, a small animal is burying an acorn it will forget in spring. Somewhere in the soil, a seed is finishing its winter and beginning to know what it wants to become. Somewhere, a root tip is pressing through soft earth, finding its way forward, one cell at a time. All of this is happening right now, in forests across the world, in the dark, in the quiet, with no fanfare and no witness, just the patient, ongoing work of life, doing what it has always done, what it will always do. Let your body rest now. Let your breath slow to the rhythm of something older and steadier than thought. Let the weight of your day dissolve into the soft earth, the way a fallen leaf dissolves through autumn and winter into the dark humus that feeds the roots, that feed the canopy, that shelters everything. You are held. You are part of this world that holds everything. The forest is breathing slowly all around you, and you can breathe slowly too. Close your eyes if they're not already closed. The tree is still standing in the meadow. The roots are still reaching in the dark. The seeds are still traveling on the wind, on the wings of birds, in the forgotten caches of small animals, to all the places they are meant to be. Let yourself go now, as gently as a leaf, into the soft and waiting dark. Thank you for spending this evening in the forest with us. Sweet dreams.